As promised, Super Attorney Kevin Hughey joins us from Hughey Phillips LLP. Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
Thank you for coming back.
Of course.
Especially under the circumstances, as I mentioned to you when we set this up, we are getting email after email after call after call after call of people who are very anxious about the vaccine. The COVID vaccine is here. Depending on where you are, state by state, California has been a disastrous rollout for the most part. But all the headlines are that, in fact, here's one right here. Just the U.S. will be swimming in COVID vaccine by next month. So in a very short amount of time, everyone will have the decision to make about the vaccine. But what we're getting emails and calls about are those that are feeling like they're not being given a choice to make that decision. So we get a lot of letters, a lot of questions, and I've been answering as best I can based on what you say, but I know there's a lot of exceptions, and there's a lot of what-ifs. So super attorney us to death. Let's start with the obvious one, the one we get the most often. Can employers demand that you get the COVID vaccine to maintain your employment?
Well, first of all, I would say that what you were talking about earlier seems to be true, that masks are saving everyone, right? I mean, it's the masks that are doing a job. But why do we need vaccines?
I don't even understand.
Where are the
masks?
So they're just miracles. Yes, an employer can require it. Absolutely.
Then we've already seen stories around the country of this happening. There's one of the first that went viral was a woman that worked at a restaurant in New York, and he said everybody get vaccinated. She refused. He fired her, and they can do that. What are the exceptions? Like, for example, why have healthcare workers, cops, and firefighters been able to in many parts of the country to refuse the vaccine?
Unions, probably. I mean, there's going to be a wave of litigation for employers. This is a no-win situation because employers have a legal duty to provide a safe working environment, right? By law. I mean, statutory. They have to do that. So by not mandating vaccines, if someone were to get sick, what are they going to do? They're going to blame the employer, right? If the employer requires vaccinations and someone doesn't want it, what's going to happen? They're going to sue the employer. I mean, there's no win here for the employers. They can require, and there are some exceptions. A couple of big ones are the ADA, right? Americans with Disabilities Act. If someone can show that they have some sort of condition that a vaccine would exacerbate or trigger or cause them some kind of harm to their disability, then they can potentially opt out. Then the burden goes back and forth a couple of times. The other is religious freedom, right? If you can prove some sort of religious
objection,
some sort of religious mandate or dogma that requires you to not do that sort of thing in order to worship.
How does that play out for somebody who's thinking, ooh, well, I'll just say that I'm religious, or I'll just become whatever this particular religion is. Can you pull that off?
No, I mean, just gets worse for employers because the employee has to prove somehow that they have that sort of worship or that sort of belief.
Yeah,
right?
Is there a religion? I mean, I know like with Jehovah Witnesses, they don't do blood transfusions. Like, is there a religion? Which one is it? Where it's like you don't take, I guess, vaccinations.
There are various religions around the world, but that goes back to my question: the which one is it thing. Can you just suddenly become part of that religion and say, "Ha, see"? I mean, you've never worshipped at all, but you find this church that has this belief, and will that fly?
Maybe, but here's the problem. Again, the problem's for the employer, because if the employer says, "Sure, I'll take you at your word," what if there's an illness in the workplace then? And what if it somehow is traced back to that person? Then the employer's on the hook for not doing due diligence as to whether this person truly...
What a mess.
It's going to be a disaster for employers.
What about the employers, now that you say that, you get me thinking, what about the employer's liability? Let's say you got a small business and... like mine, and nobody's afraid of it, and maybe nobody's interested in the vaccine, and even people like Dawn who are at risk say, I don't want it, so I don't make the policy. But let's say somehow COVID gets into the building, it can be contact traced, and then Kyle goes and gives it to somebody in his family who is at risk, and they die. I mean, is there going to be those type of contact tracing problems for the employer of, well, since we didn't vaccinate, we've got these things on the hook down the road. So are you advising most of your employers to force people to vaccinate?
No.
Okay. My staff is very happy to hear that answer, I think.
Oh my God. Why don't you put us all in camps that aren't vaccinated?
A bit of a conflict here because personally I won't vaccinate, and I certainly wouldn't have my kids do it because I think there's going to be another wave. We're not going to know. I don't think we even know what this virus is yet, right? Completely, much less the vaccination. I mean, 10 years from now, we're going to find out what these vaccines did.
Exactly.
There's going to be a wave of litigation then. But to be safe for an employer, if they came to me and said, what should we do to be safe? I would say, first of all, start with your legal duty. Your legal duty is to provide a safe work environment. So what should you do?
Well, I think you already answered this since you said you've chosen you're not going to get the vaccine.
I'm not.
So I assume then you're not requiring people at Hughey Phillips LLP to do it.
I'm not.
But what about your duty to create a safe work environment? And what about mine, since you're not advising me to do it?
There are accommodations that can be made. If there is a concern that someone has, if they can work and do their job from home, I might consider it.
So you are very sympathetic to employers who are forcing their employees because of all of the liabilities that you brought up.
I think they're put in a very bad position.
Now you brought up your kids. The vaccine won't even be approved or ready until later this summer, and I think that's only for older kids. And I heard 2022 is when it would be approved and ready for younger kids. We already have a policy that stands in the country, again, except for the exceptions that you mentioned. As far as I understand, if you want to go to public school, there's a list of vaccinations your kid has to get. I assume COVID's going to wind up on that list pretty quickly, right?
Probably.
And they can do that.
They can.
And your only choice then is to homeschool or private school as a parent, if you don't want to get your kid the vaccine.
I will private school them.
And that's the only thing anybody could do.
Right.
Which you're in a fortunate position to financially be able to do that.
Yeah.
Not everybody can.
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, but I realize in the way you're looking at it, it's your kid's health. I get it. Nothing's more important than that. Right. I mean, it's my job to keep them safe, and I don't think that vaccinations that we've rushed through the process are necessarily safe. They could be, but
you're not willing to be a guinea pig yet, and you're certainly not your kid.
Absolutely not my children.
By the way, other questions if we're not hitting them, 888-989-9811 as we go
And
through
I
this.
wonder if it's depending on the private school, because one of my friends' kids goes to private school, and they're weird about COVID. I mean, they are so crazy about it, and they feel one kid was exposed to it from someone in the family. So now whoever this kid had contact with at school, all those kids are at home right now. This is private school.
And could a private school require?
They could.
They could, right? I mean, you're going to find the private school that's not requiring vaccinations if you're of that mindset.
My little one goes to a private school, and I'm hoping that shoe doesn't drop it. He's been going to school outside this whole time. You know, he goes to school with 3 layers of clothes on because he's freezing his butt off. All the little kids are outdoors.
Oh, they're literally outside.
They're literally outdoors.
Wow.
And the older one's not. He's still at the kitchen table.
Wow.
Right. Okay. So for some reason, like guns come to mind, right? Where it's like guns will make some people feel really safe if there's one around, and then guns will make some people feel really unsafe if there's guns around, right? So is it that whole like idea of an employer needs to provide a safe workplace? Like, is safe subjective, or is there an ability for safe to be under the banner of everybody's vaccinated from COVID-19? Because that's the only way that you could actually be safe.
OSHA sets forth the guidelines, and the Department of Industrial Relations. So you have to look at, and they haven't changed those yet, as far as I know. But to the degree that we're dealing with a virus that people are terrified of, it's kind of a no-brainer that an employer should consider requiring vaccination to provide a safe environment. Because, again, if the employer doesn't and someone gets sick, what's going to happen?
And it only takes
get sued.
one in your company.
Correct.
That is terrified or that has something happen.
Right. And the California regs that came down, did you look at those in terms of what an employer has to do if someone gets sick?
Yes.
Holy
you sent
crud.
them to me. Yeah.
I mean, it's frightening.
But, okay, from what we've been told, even if you get vaccinated, you could still get coronavirus. It's just maybe
you don't get sick from it.
Right. So
that's why you have to have everybody vaccinated.
Okay, but so you have everyone vaccinated, but we get it. One of us gets it, we don't know it, and we do give it to someone outside of this building. Does it still get pointed back to you?
No, because then I can prove everybody here is vaccinated. So they did that. Their most so you contact trace that somewhere else.
The insanity of it, right? Though, because the same thing can happen whether you're vaccinated or not. But because you were.
The whole thing is just a fear reaction. I mean, it's just a knee-jerk fear reaction.
Yes.
I think the answer to this one's pretty obvious. It's from Adrian.
Yo, Adrian!
It says, can I get in trouble with my employer if I lie and say I got the vaccine when I didn't actually get it? My job hasn't said they will require the vaccine, but people are starting to ask me if I've gotten the vaccine. Well, they're going to require proof, right? I mean, any employer of any sense is going to say, you got to show me this certificate.
Right, because they want it for their files.
Right.
So if something does happen, they can say, I did what I should, right?
Listen.
I required it.
Lying never works. Eventually you get caught. What are you doing, you moron?
This is from Beverly.
Hi, Beverly.
RAD at radradio.com. I made an eye doctor appointment. They require that I sign a form stating that if I contract COVID in their office, I can't hold them responsible. Is this going to be the norm? Honestly, if I happen to contract it, wouldn't the onus be on me to prove it?
Sort of. I mean, the problem with that sort of waiver is you can't waive future potential claims. You can't waive actionable conduct that hasn't happened yet. That's against public policy. So you can sign like an assumption of the risk, but it won't. It probably won't hold up.
Since we allude to now all of the concerns over the vaccine, and we reported most of the surveys are between, because you get so many different surveys, 30 and 50% of Americans in general are saying they're hesitant, they want to wait, they're resistant, and that's a lot. And there's no way, if those polls are right, there's no way that we are going to get to Dr. Fauci's herd immunity number of 75 to 80% if it's based on the vaccine. So one of the things we've been positing on the show, and we've already seen stories about this, is that the possibility of government and businesses creating policies that say you can't do things unless you are vaccinated. For example, we've seen it with masks. Can they do it with vaccines? Can Costco say, we have a new policy. You can't shop here unless you can prove that you've been vaccinated?
Well, they could, but that would be pretty bad for business, right?
Well, under the guise of only if enough people stuck to their guns. And the way I view it is, the way I'm viewing it, and this is usually you're the paranoid one. This is my paranoid mindset. Is just like the mask thing. The government comes out, pressures their big corporations, and it's not just Costco. It's Costco, Walmart, Best. Pretty soon you can't go anywhere other than local, small-owned places, unless you can prove you're vaccinated. That's how I view. I would view it as a massive rollout, almost like with the president standing there giving a press conference with the CEOs of the 15 biggest retail organizations in the country, saying we've all agreed to this, under the guise of forcing you to make that choice. I either got to get vaccinated, or I don't, and I don't have anywhere to go. And you can extrapolate it further than Costco. You can't get on an airplane in America. Can they make that policy?
They could. I would be horrified if they did. But you also start to touch on other issues like confidentiality, your own health care. I mean,
a lot of people have asked about HIPAA with this
too. You're going
to
have to disclose to Costco what your health care has been. There's a middle ground there, a worse middle ground, I think, and that is the states have the power, the health, welfare, and safety power. Governors could just issue a law that says we have to be vaccinated. The feds can't, but the states can't.
What? So it would be,
or
I can't live here?
Committing a crime.
Oh, it's a crime.
Yeah, they could enact a law.
Is this under emergency? Like, could they do it with a signature under the emergency powers thing?
Called health, welfare, and safety.
That I see. That I totally see. I see that before the corporations.
Correct, because
I really do.
That makes sense.
The private businesses, they would be shooting themselves in both feet.
Well, I just think short term they kind of would. Maybe from my little understanding of this is because now I'm picturing them all standing up there. It's like short term they'd kick themselves in the foot because now people have to run out and get the vaccine, and it's not like you're just going to get it that day. And then they have to wait for them to get the second shot. So how much time is going by where there aren't a lot of people shopping at their businesses, you know?
Right. Plus you have to figure the people are going to take some sort of ideological stand. I mean, there's nowhere that I feel like I need to shop so much that I would even remotely feel compelled to do that. Right. I mean, I can go get bottled water anywhere. I couldn't fathom that enough people would fall in line on that.
What? So in your draconian theory of governors just saying you're committing a crime if you're not vaccinated, how do you get caught then? How do they find you? Wouldn't that then work in
census data? Maybe
wouldn't that be where they work in concert with the stores and make the stores show you, because everybody's talking across the world about these COVID passports, these vaccination passports.
I think they wouldn't have to work with stores. They could work with healthcare providers. They could get your healthcare files.
What did you read that Israel's doing? Could they do that? Do they come to your house, or what are they doing to trace people? I thought part of it too was tracing.
Israel, which is leading the world right now in vaccinations, has empowered the government to share with other government agencies the names and addresses of people that have not yet been vaccinated, so that they can go to your door and say, "We really would like you to get vaccinated." Now, there is no or what that I've read yet. This literally just passed, but it starts with that very intimidating coercion that will work on a lot of people, because that gets pretty scary when you got somebody with a badge or whatever from some department of some health.
It's kind of Gestapo-ish, right?
Which is the irony of Israel being the first in the world to do it.
Yes.
And then the other question too of these COVID passports, which, because we're talking about state laws here, also federal laws in America. Now you've got the rest of the world, which is very freely discussing, you can't come to our country if you haven't been vaccinated. Well, nothing we can do about that, right? If the EU says you cannot come to Europe unless you can prove you've been vaccinated, we can't go to, if we don't get the vaccine, we can't go.
Traveling is a privilege, not a right.
Phone number is 888-989-9811. Hi there, Dee.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
Anybody. I'm just so thankful for you guys to be speaking common sense, and so thankful for your awesome attorney to be doing the same.
Awesome.
My question is, if my employer forces me, in essence, to get the vaccine, and there are those adverse reactions that we all know is going to happen 5-10 years from now, and I get them and I have health problems, can I go back and sue that employer?
Yes. Here's where it gets even stickier.
God.
Again, this is the no-win situation for employers. What could happen, and I think what's likely to happen, is that there's going to be some sort of immunity granted to employers, such that if an employer requires vaccination, they cannot be sued later. I don't think that'll hold up, but that's probably what's coming.
But it'll take years for that to not hold up. I mean,
Right.
it takes a long time, as we've talked about, especially now with COVID and the shutdown, so they can put these policies in place, and literally for many months, if not years, we don't get a decision that says, oh yeah, that was unconstitutional.
Right.
And so in the meantime, people got to live, people got to work, people got to somehow, which is where the coercion comes in.
Right. And plus the problem is that people who might sign a waiver like that don't even know what they're waiving, because we don't know what the vaccines may hold for us, right? We don't know what we would be giving up. An illness, a carcinogen. I mean, what is it that could affect people?
So now that question's about, and what you're alluding to there is about like 3, 5, 10 years down the road, if there's something that there's no way for us to know. What about I'm really trying to not fearmonger here. All the reporting is that while it is relatively rare, there are some people who've had very serious immediate side effects, and they've wound up in the hospital. There's been reports of possible other lumps growing, and again, very, 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 very small number. But what about an immediate reaction to a vaccine that your employer forces you to take? Is the employer somehow on the hook there?
Yes.
Okay. Let me try and follow me along. This is where I think big business and government really could work together, because they already do.
In a good way or an evil way?
In an evil way, like they do a lot of times. That something is promised, whatever it is they do, right? In the back rooms that they do this, from the businesses to the government, because it would be beneficial to the businesses if the government, your scenario, were to be the one to force us by law to get it. It'd be way more beneficial to the businesses. They don't have to deal with all this stuff that we're talking about at all. And when you look at the amount of American citizens who have just willingly complied with whatever it is mayors, governors have said, and all of that stuff everything they've been telling us to do isn't against the law. We didn't have to do these things. We just did, and we complied. But for whatever reason, we're freaked out about a virus. The minute you tell them it's against the law, or someone shows up at the door, that's it. They already know. People are going to be like, okay, here, I'll do it now. We've already shown how easily we'll succumb to anything the government says.
Well, that doesn't have to be a negative. I mean, unless they go back on their word, which I know would be shocking. If they're able to scare up 70% of the population, or whatever that number is, to get the vaccine, then maybe if you remain, I'm not taking the vaccine, we get the pronouncement, herd immunity is here, and life is back to normal. Now, of course, the going back on the word part is, yeah, but not for you, pal, because you didn't get the, but they can't, right. They can't get 100% of us to take the vaccine. That's impossible, at least under the current makeup of the United States. They can't force us to put the needle in our arms. Can they yet?
The states can.
with that law.
With a law. They have the authority to do that. The federal government does not. But again, the states have the authority to legislate for the health, welfare, and safety. And all a governor has to do is, or the local legislature is, for the health, welfare, and safety of our citizenry, we have to do this.
So under that scenario, and I asked you earlier, how do you get caught? Let's just say you get caught. They find out you haven't had the vaccine. You're because you pay taxes and you're not on record as having gotten the vaccine. It could be that easy, right? Well, then what? Do they arrest you, or they don't tie you down in like in a movie in a hospital bed and jab you? I mean, what would be the enforcement?
Like you said, not to fearmonger too much here, because hopefully none of this ever happens, right? But they can strap you down and stick the needle in you.
I mean, listen, when it comes to
The state government.
The state government.
so if someone shows up at my door and it's not a law, and they're doing this thing they're doing in Israel just to intimidate me, is this a law? No. Okay, try and intimidate you all you want. Bye. No, not going to happen. But if they're knocking at my door and the police are there and it's a law, I'm not someone who breaks the law. Right? So now it's another level.
It's another way of forcing you into a decision. It's like what we started with of, do I need to go to Costco that badly? They just that would be an up the ante version of forcing that. Because
that is an easier choice. I'm not going to go to Costco, as opposed to, do I go to jail for this? Do I seriously want to go? Is this where I want to plant my flag? I'm going to go to jail for this.
This is from Please Don't Use My Name. Email says, I coach football in the Sacramento area. Our school district scheduled the entire coaching staff COVID vaccine appointments. Is it mandatory for teachers or coaches to get the vaccine? I'm not comfortable getting it, but I don't want to be fired.
Whatever the school district said, I don't know if they're making it mandatory.
And I mean, all he said was that they scheduled the coaching staff. Is this another way of, you're scheduled to get the vaccine, but somebody's got to stand up and go, well, what if I don't want it? And then it comes down to the individual district's policy, and also, I assume, same thing, unions and collective bargaining that's been agreed to.
I think it starts with public shaming first, right? I mean, they're going to try to embarrass you and harass you, intimidate. They're not going to say, wait, you work with children. Why wouldn't you? You're going to risk the children's health.
Oh, my God, which they're totally fine.
The children who aren't threatened by this disease at all. Okay.
Well, and I'm wondering, is there any, what is the tangibility of, there being exceptions for people who have certain illnesses? I know as far as what I have read and what I've seen on CDC websites in reference to people specifically living with HIV or AIDS, there have been there was testing done in January in countries that have a large infection rate of HIV, but in a lot of studies they excluded people living with HIV as a way to not have variables in the testing process. I guess from what I read, again, I could totally be misreading what I'm reading, but what about people who have diseases that could react badly? Is it just kind of well, everybody take it, and some of you who have this might go? How far is too far as far as the casualty rate from the other side?
Well, we touched on it earlier. That's the ADA exception, right? If you have some sort of health condition that the vaccine will compromise or worse, then you can be accepted.
Now, the obvious question I have is, how do we know? I mean, there are some pre-existing conditions that we know, if you're prone to anaphylactic shock, for example, they've already said don't get the vaccine. But to Queenie's question, do we even know if you have HIV that you are or aren't prone? How do we even know how the vaccine might affect you? So you can make that claim,
and that's a problem. We don't know, right?
And they could say, well, we have no proof of that until you're the guinea pig.
I think people with compromised immune systems will be easily accepted, because the vaccinations, not all of them, but generally they're putting a dead strain in you. Right? A dead strain of a virus can still do some harm.
All right, we're working a break here. We're running long. You can stick around for another 20 minutes, right?
Of course.
Okay. Phone number is 888-989-9811. You can email us, rad@radradio.com. We're with super attorney Kevin Hughey from Hughey Phillips LLP. We'll continue after this.